Slowed down 14,000 times, it's clear that the kick or recoil of the high-precision M16 moves it very little. Not the AK-47. It's throwing itself around. Look at the end of the barrel. It's clearly flexing up and down. One reason for this wobbly performance is the way it works.
What's happening when this is fired is, of course, the cycle rate's fairly high, and you've got a really big hunk of metal coming back, and it's slightly off-center. Not much, but slightly off-center. So this thing's coming back and then coming back forward, so you've got really two violent acts going on, and then if you have the round going off, you have a third violent act going on.
We've set up targets at about 200 yards. It's an easy distance for a decent rifle. First up is the M16. What we're looking for is grouping, how close the shots are to each other. Every shot strikes close to the heart, in the kill zone. Now, the AK-47. Only one of the 5 shots even tags the lower left edge of the paper. Not one strikes the kill zone. And it's clear from the design of the sights that the American weapon was designed to be more accurate from the very start.
The sights are very good. You have a little peep sight here in the back, okay, which you can use for short range. And what you could do is you can actually flip it forward, and if you look on the back, you can actually see an L. That's for long distance. In the front, you have just a post with what we call bunny ears, which flare out. And what you do is you center your post in the center of your rear sight, and you put it right on target, and you fire, and you should hit target.
The AK sight is very crude.
It's not as good as the peep sights that the Americans have been using since World War II. You take your front post and you line it up with the little notch right here, and the top of the front post and the top of this bar will be level. And you set your target right on top of those 3 points. This way.
The Soviet solution was brutally simple. Take the heavy old rifle bullet and make it shorter, and therefore lighter. The M16 uses a smaller, slimmer bullet. With far less recoil than the AK, the M16 gun can weigh barely 2/3 as much as the AK-47. The AK-47's heavier bullet may be slower and less accurate, but its sheer power is indisputable. We've set up these cinder blocks to simulate the wall of a building in a combat zone. First, the M16. Quite impressive. And now, the AK-47. We've also simulated a jungle environment with this 8-inch block of dense pine. At 28 yards, the M16 bullet fails to penetrate. And the AK-47? Can be better as rifles or as machine guns. There'll always be a design trade-off. The M16 is closer to a rifle, the AK-47 a machine gun, and you can see it clearly in the fire selector switch.
The AK-47, when you start in the upper position, you're in the safe position. It also works as a dust cover. You drop down 1 notch, you're on fully automatic. Next notch is semi-automatic. This is primarily a machine gun. It's to be used on fully automatic. Where with an M16, your selector lever goes to the safe position, to the semi position, to the automatic position.
Knots, dip them in motor oil and yank them through the barrel. And that was clean enough.
But what made the AK-47 a universal killing machine was the ease with which soldiers could be trained to use it.
It was said in the 70s that a child's first weapon should be a Kalashnikov because he couldn't go wrong with it. He couldn't make it not fire.
If I were to take an American soldier out today, I could get him to field strip, clean,
and take care of an AK in about 4 hours. The M16, I'm going to have to take a week. It's that simple.
In the 1950s and 60s, the AK-47 became synonymous with Western fears of a massed Soviet invasion in Eastern Europe.
One of the main underlying facts of the Cold War is that Ivan was going to come thundering through the Fulda Gap in central Germany with more tanks than God. And out of those tanks and armored personnel carriers, 1 million Russians, every one of them with a Kalashnikov.
But the threat of a Soviet invasion never transpired. Instead, it got its first taste of war in Vietnam.
The AK-47's largest use, perhaps, was in the Vietnam War. Large numbers of AK-47s from the Soviet Union were provided to the North Vietnamese Army and to the Viet Cong.
The AK-47 went head-to-head with the American M16 and emerged on the winning side. The Kalashnikov had proved itself. Through the latter part of the 20th century, it could be heard spitting out shells on every corner of the world.
During the Cold War, the Russians would underwrite just about anybody who would say, oh, yeah, we're socialist. We hate the United States. They would throw Kalashnikovs at them. And so we have Kalashnikovs everywhere.
During the PLO's high-profile terrorist activities of the 1970s, the Kalashnikov was always in the news. In Afghanistan, Soviet troops and the Mujahideen went toe-to-toe with AK-47s. And in guerrilla wars across Africa, the clatter of the AK has resounded. As a result, it has become more than a weapon. It has become an icon.
If there's a single thing that represents the heyday of Soviet revolutionary expansionism, it is the AK-47. It becomes, next to Che Guevara's image on the high school student's t-shirt, the iconic image of the 1960s and 70s. It is everywhere. It's on the flag of a country, of Mozambique, because it was so central in their revolution.
And so Americans have grown up seeing the AK-47 as the bad guy's gun. People don't like the looks of the AK. It's an ugly gun. You can't picture John Wayne carrying an AK-47. Would he carry one? Probably. He was a practical man.
In 1974, the Kalashnikov was updated. The AK-74 fired a 5.45 millimeter cartridge and had a longer effective range of 550 yards. A muzzle brake was also added, giving it a slightly greater overall length than the AK-47. 3 decades later, it has survived the disintegration of communism to remain the Russian gun of choice.
The Russian military still uses the weapon and is still product testing newer versions of the same weapon. They may put newer stocks on it and try to make some small improvements, but it's still the same action that that Soviet tank sergeant designed at the end of World War II.
Along with the AK-47, the AK-74 has continued to pop up in small wars, terrorist attacks, and criminal activity worldwide.
The AK-47 is the consummate assault rifle, and it will be around long after all of us have dissolved into dust. As long as there's ammo available, they'll be used.
The AK-47 is an indestructible, universal killing machine. Hardly surprising, then, that it scores top marks for combat effectiveness. Handling is excellent. Service length is excellent. Innovation is excellent. Accuracy is average, but the Kalashnikov compensates for this with its ability to unleash a lethal wall of lead.